This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 285, originally aired September 20th, 2017. Hi everyone, I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today is a conversation with my buddy Brad Yates, where we talk about money, resistance to having money, and how we can tap to be in a position where we are more comfortable dealing with money and we're more comfortable with having more money. Before we jump into that and talk about money and all of the things collected to money, I wanted to remind you that the Tapping Q&A podcast has this absolutely amazing archive, resources waiting for you, not including this episode right here. There are 348 audios waiting in that archive, absolutely free for you to dive into. There is over 156 hours of free material waiting for you. Interviews like the amazing one we have today, tap along audios, instruction. Now, you don't have to go dive in and download the whole thing and consume it all, but if there is something that you are struggling with, or there's someone you love in the tapping world, we have interviewed them or we've covered the topic. All you need to do is go to tappingqandapodcast.com and dive right in. It's there waiting for you, absolutely free. You can find all of those audios also in the Google Music Play Store, in Apple Podcasts, in TuneIn, in Stitcher. It's all over the place. It would be foolish for you to miss the opportunity to take advantage of all these amazing free resources. So today's conversation is with, like I said, my buddy Brad Yates, and we talk about money. We talk about resistance around money, and Brad did a really interesting thing in talking about how we can have resistance in having more and we can have resistance in having left. And we kind of get caught in this middle zone, which is sufficient, but we might be in a circumstance where we could easily have a lot more. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with Brad is one of the people who is presenting with me at the Uncomplicate Your Relationship with Money conference that's happening in Orlando in November. This is just a little teaser and a step into all of the stuff that Brad's going to be covering once we gather in Florida. It's going to be a great 2-day event. If you go to tappingqanda.com/money, you will find out all of the information on the event. Again, it's tappingqanda.com/money. And one of the really interesting things about the event is, in a lot of ways, we're giving the opportunity for practitioners to be able to really look at the way that they're dealing with money. Something important to note also about this event, if you happen to work in the mental health profession, if you attend this event, there are actually some CEUs available. So you can continue your education and get credit for that. I'm going to have to read this because there are a lot of words here, but this is who has approved the event. The State of Florida Composite Board of Licensed Mental Health Clinicians, licensed clinical social workers, and licensed marriage and family therapists. So if you are one of those type people and you are in a state which accepts the CEUs from places like Florida, in addition to getting a chance to get yourself clear on these money blocks, you're going to have the opportunity to use it as professional development as well. If all of that sounds like gobbledygook to you, you are not excluded. This is really about clearing money blocks and being able to move forward in a way that is useful. That's just an added bonus for that. So please come to Florida, join Brad, join myself. It's going to be an amazing 2 days. Again, tappingqanda.com/money. If you go into the show notes, if you're listening to this in a podcatcher of some sort, you will be able to click on the link right there in the show notes. So without further ado, here is my conversation about money and resistance with Brad Yates. When you, not as practitioner, not as someone who works for people for a living, when you think of money, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Opportunity. The opportunity to travel, to go do fun things, have nice things.
And for some people, they can see that connection and they can recognize the fact that it is this amazing asset that we can do awesome things with. And for other people, it creates just a great sense of anxiety. The people you tap with, the clients you have conversations with, what does that anxiety look like? And what is preventing them from being able to see it as a tool the way that you described it at the beginning?
Yeah, there's so much anxiety based on past experiences with money, whether it's their parents' difficult relationship with money, and sometimes it's long before their parents. Some people come from a long line of people who have a very complicated relationship, an unpleasant relationship with money. It may be based on old experiences with how they've handled money. Like, I've never handled money well, or I had someone who, when she was 6 years old, her mom had given her some money for to buy some candy or something like that, and she lost the money, and her mom said, "Oh, you just can't be trusted with money." And from that point on, it was a very uncomfortable relationship with money. So there's all these negative beliefs that we pick up about either money or people who have money. And certainly that's very prevalent with the Occupy Wall Street and things like that. We see people who have lots of money as the enemy, and our internal system doesn't want to be the enemy. So if we can avoid having money, then we get to be on the right side of justice or morality or whatever it is that we might have these beliefs around.
And one of the things that's interesting about that, and I see the exact same thing. I mean, you just look at popular culture, with the exception of Daddy Warbucks and Annie, there's almost never a nice person who has money in movies, because it sets up this really easy, do the right thing, have lots of stuff narrative. And what's difficult about living through that particular story is money is like food. It's something that we can't avoid. If I'm afraid of snakes, I can create a world where I never have to interact with a snake ever again. I don't have to look at a picture of a snake. It's just not something that's part of my life.
Just move to Ireland.
Right. But money is a circumstance where I don't have that opportunity. That I can have this dichotomy that being on the side of right is being without money because the money with people are bad, but I can't exist in this world unless I interact in some capacity with money.
Exactly. It's one of those strange things. It's like working with folks with addiction. If someone has an addiction to alcohol or drugs, they can go completely cold turkey. For somebody with a food addiction, it becomes much more complicated. And it's the same very much with money, because in our society, there are very few places on the planet where you can live completely off the grid without money. And so, and we can limit it. So that's where we create our financial thermostat of, well, as long as I only have this amount of money, then I'm okay. But even then, there's something dirty about it. And we have stress handling and paying our bills and things like that. So even if we keep ourselves out of that dangerous zone of being wealthy or greedy, which part of us says is greedy or evil, but even the little bit of money that we allow ourselves to have, there's always going to be some stress involved. And so even for those people avoiding wealth, even avoiding financial security, there's still some stress involved with anything that has to do with money. And so that's where it can be so beneficial to tap on it. And so for folks who say, well, I don't want to tap on money issues because I'm fine with money. I don't need to have more money. I'm okay with the little bit I have. It's like, yes, but then there's still some stress that's causing you upset, that's getting in your way, whether it's about the little bit of money that you're handling or just the images you see of other people having money, and you're causing yourself undue discomfort on a daily basis.
So in that answer, I want to grab on to something that you said in there, and I think I understand what you mean, but you just said it passing. I want to make sure I pin it down. You used the phrase, I think it was money or financial thermostat.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that term? So,
like, we have our thermostat in our house, and we set it to, say, 72 degrees. And if the temperature goes above 72 degrees, the air conditioner kicks on and it cools it down to get it back to 72. If it starts to get too cold, then the heater kicks on and it goes back up to 72. So the thermostat is designed to keep us in what we feel is our comfort zone. And so with the regular thermostats with temperature, with money, we do the same thing where we have, based on our past experiences, based on our beliefs, we have a comfort zone with money. So if your house is 72 degrees, maybe let's say your financial thermostat is $72,000 a year. So if you're, say, in sales, if you're not quite making 72,000, something inside of you is going to kick in and start to make more calls or whatever it is. And you might not even be totally consciously aware of it. Something inside of you is saying, oh, we need to get back up to our comfort zone. But if you make too many sales and you start going over $72,000, then something says, ooh, this is not comfortable. This is outside our comfort zone. We need to stop making calls. We need to miss a few meetings and bring it back down into that comfort zone. And this is why so many, I believe it's the majority of people who win the lottery, blow it all within a year because they are immediately shot out. You know, if your thermostat in your house is set to 72 degrees, imagine suddenly there's a heat wave and the house goes up to 100 degrees. And, you know, it's extremely uncomfortable and you'd be doing anything you can to get back to your comfort zone. And consciously, so many people consciously say, oh, I want to win the lottery, and never even consider the fact that, okay, there's going to be a lot of changes and it's going to be severe changes quickly. And that's why it throws so many people into a tough place.
And so I guess in navigating that and kind of understanding the place to start and figuring that out can be hard, because even if we're able to draw this corollary between money and food is something we need all the time. Money is something we need all the time. We at least have a sense of what a balanced diet looks like. We at least have a sense of how much food I'm supposed to be eating. And it can be pretty easy for me to tell if I'm eating too much. How do we figure out what our money thermostat is set at? Because we don't have these clear guidelines of caloric intake, and the way that we're sabotaging ourselves away from going beyond that can be something that's a lot subtler.
Actually, it can be fairly simple, in almost as simple as going online and looking at your bank statement and seeing, okay, how much money have I been making? And very often, for most of us, we make a pretty steady amount, and we spend a fairly steady amount. And so just looking at our financial records at our bank, we can get an idea of, oh, there's definitely a pattern here. My thermostat seems to be set at a pretty consistent amount, other than those rare people who their income keeps doubling and things like that. So we can get a pretty good idea if we look at our spending habits and our regular income and see, all right, that I obviously have an idea of this is an amount that's safe for me to have based on my past experiences, based on what my parents made. Maybe I have a belief of I shouldn't make more than my dad because that would dishonor him, or I shouldn't make more than my spouse because then it would get really uncomfortable, and all kinds of little things like that we may not be consciously aware of, but are behind the scenes directing our behaviors.
And so in a moment, I want to get into some of the nitty gritty around figuring out kind of what those underlying beliefs are. But in order for us to do that, and in order for us to do that assessment, we have to do that assessment. Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I've certainly seen this with clients that I've worked with where we were trying to do stuff around this. Mm-hmm. And the simple act of doing that assessment was something that was really emotionally challenging, if not impossible. Yeah. Just because, money's scary. And I can feel, I don't know about you, but I don't like doing things I'm not competent at. There are things I'm good at, and I'm going to lean into those strengths, and I'm going to spend a lot of time doing those things. And the things that are new and the things that are difficult, I find really magical ways of never getting to them. Yeah. And so I think it's easy for us to say practically, you just go look at your money and you can start figuring this out. without first recognizing some people, that's going to be the first place that they start. And that's the first issue that they have to tap on.
Yeah. Some people they don't balance their checkbook. They don't look at their online statement. They have no idea what it is. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, even if you say, okay, well, having too much money is greedy and bad, so I'm not going to have that, and that's how I'm going to avoid the whole issue, you're still having money stress, even with whatever amount you have. Like you said, money is like food. It's necessary, and there are things we need to take care of. So if we refuse to look at nutritional labels and find out how much sugar really is in this thing, and a lot of people, probably the majority of people, don't look at those kinds of things. They don't consider what they're putting into their body. So we avoid those things that cause us stress, that are uncomfortable, that we don't think we're good at. So even if we're limiting our amount of money to what we think is a moral level, we're still going to cause ourselves stress by not checking what's going on, by not being aware of where the money's coming in, where the money's going out. And as you said, it's that discomfort if it's not one of our strengths, and we don't want to get it wrong. So I find that with a number of things in my own life, with sometimes technical things. It's like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that because I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. And so that definitely causes us some challenges. So naturally, I know you and I have the same solution. We start tapping on things like that. It's like, oh, there's stress around looking at my online account. I think I could tap to start clearing that stress and allow myself the freedom to go, okay, let's take a look at what's going on here.
So on a practical level, the first step is to just kind of do an assessment to see where we are. On an emotional level, probably the first step is going to be tapping to clear any of the emotions that we have about doing that particular assessment. So let's pretend that we have gotten past the point of being afraid to look. We've done the look. We see what the numbers are. When you were talking about it earlier, you went through a whole list of limiting beliefs that I'm sure have come up from working with clients around beliefs about money and beliefs about family and stuff like that. How does someone do an investigation once they realize, yes, I have this really specific money thermometer, that this is the point that emotionally I'm not letting myself go past? How do we start then to uncover what are the beliefs that are underneath that are holding us in that spot?
What I'll generally do with someone is have them close their eyes and just following their breath through their body, just getting, checking in. And so anyone listening to this, you can go ahead and do this right now. Close your eyes, follow your breath through your body, and think about having more money. Imagine what that might be like. It might be, you might imagine looking at your online bank statement and seeing, more, bigger numbers in there. It might be a matter of, would you be living in a different house? Would you have more customers? Would you be driving a nicer car? Whatever it is that you believe would happen, what your life would look like if you had the amount of money you say you want. And then I say, now on a scale of 0 to 10, how comfortable does that feel? I might have them say, it's safe to have this much money, or it's okay to have this much money. I deserve to have this much money. And check each of those on a scale of 0 to 10 as to how true they feel. I would say, if you think it's a 10, you're not, you're kidding yourself, because if it was a 10, you'd already have that amount of money.
Right. And
in that place of feeling that, where it might not be a 10, I'll ask them first, what do you feel physically and emotionally? Is there a tension someplace, a tightness in your neck or your stomach? And then I'd say, and what thoughts, beliefs, and memories might be coming up? And so either they'll either get a physical sensation. If they don't have, if they're not sure what the belief is, it may just be there's a knot in the stomach, and we can start from there. Or they may get very clear of, oh, I suddenly remembered this thing that happened, and so they might have greater clarity about what kind of events in their lives might have programmed this. There may be a fear of, I know that my family would be jealous of me and I'd feel like an outcast. My friends wouldn't like me anymore. And so it starts to be, when we take the time to actually look at it, we start to get greater clarity about what might be there. And again, sometimes it's the belief and sometimes it's just the physical sensation. And whichever it is, we can start doing some tapping there. And one of the great things about tapping is it's, like peeling the layers of an onion. And so as we start clearing out the stress, there's a greater opening in our awareness and we start to realize, oh, and then this thing happened, and oh, here's where it is. And we recognize where the misinformation is, where we got confused about situations, where there were misunderstandings, and we can start to change our mind about money.
One of the things that I find really beautiful and useful about the answer that you just gave there was this very clear description of starting with the information that is provided. I literally had this exact conversation with a client this morning where, as she was doing some work, she was frustrated around the fact that when she initially tuned into something, there was just kind of this vague emotion of anger. Mm-hmm. And there was no memories, and there was no limiting belief, and there was no one it was attached to. It was just the sense of anger. And as she spent some time with it, and did a little tapping on just what had presented itself, then it moved on to something that was betrayal. Like it presented itself with more information. Yeah. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we hear a list of possible limiting beliefs around money, because as you are listing off these beliefs, I'm sure most of the people listening along have heard those before, but giving ourselves that space to say, okay, this is all the system is giving me right now, and that's perfect and that's beautiful because I can use that to have that unfold. So I just really wanted to shine a spotlight on that because it's an important part of the process that I think a lot of people miss when they're tapping along to something.
Yeah, to start wherever we are with whatever we've got. Too often there's a sense that we need to know exactly what precise core belief or core incident it is before we can start tapping. And I think we lose an opportunity. And I mean, there's all kinds of ways to go about it. For me, I like to start tapping as soon as possible on whatever might be there, even though I don't know what's going on. I choose to love and accept myself, because again, in the process of the tap, because the not knowing what it is part of our genius. If I have a belief that having more than $72,000 a year would be dangerous to me, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, I am not going to let myself know what the key is to breaking through that barrier.
Yeah.
So there's a barrier there to knowing what's there. But as I start tapping, that's where I start to clear the stress and the fear and, find the keys to the kingdom and say, all right, here's where the block is. And now it's okay for us to start looking at it and start changing that.
And I think the other thing that happens in that unfolding process, particularly for something like money, is it is unlike fear of snakes, where with a fear of snakes, I can move myself back to a proportional, reasonable response to snakes. And I'm now comfortable with snakes inside of cages. Like that's this really clear thing that happens. For something like money, going from a set point of 72,000 to 82,000, there's multiple steps along that path. And as we are doing this work, not only is it possible for the information and the issues to unfold in front of us, the way that we transform and move towards a different spot is something that can also happen incrementally over time. I am certainly open to the possibility of doing some tapping and $10,000 magically showing up and me being comfortable going from $72,000 to $82,000. But in most cases, that's probably not going to be the way that it shows up. It shows up in the way that we access opportunities and the things that are around us. And so I think it's good for us to also recognize that as we transform this might be incremental as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that unfolding comfort, we becoming more and more comfortable. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily happen in one lump sum, but there's a shift in our behavior. So if we have that limitation of 72,000, there is part of us that that knows, okay, I need to make I need to stop making calls after a certain number of calls. I need to close down the shop an hour earlier or whatever it is. And there's all kinds of little things that we might start doing that little by little it increases and as we go up to, become more comfortable with 82,000. And then at that point, it's like, oh, now I can become more comfortable with, say, $90,000. And so a lot of people, when I remember talking to a woman once, I said, how much money would you like to make? And she goes, I want to make $500 million a year. And I'm like, well, how much are you making now? And it wasn't anything near that. And it's like, okay, what you're doing is you're creating a belief that, or creating an idea that your mind feels safe with, because your mind is saying it's never going to happen. And so it's easy to say $500 million because it sounds really exciting, but I know that I'm never going to do anything like that. So it stays in that fantasy realm, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to set a goal of another $10,000, $25,000 a year or something like that. That we know from people around us. Oh, that's possible, because then it brings it into the realm of reality, and allowing it to grow like that, and say, okay, now I'm more comfortable with this, and the behaviors and patterns of our lives start to change to accommodate that.
And in some cases, that creation of the fantasy, part of the reason that we're able to create the fantasy is not so much that it's not going to be true, but it's not a real number. That I have no idea tangibly what $500 million is. That there is a certain point that once you start saying numbers to me, you could just be saying a gazillion, a bazillion, like making up numbers that aren't real. Right. Just because those numbers are so I'm no longer emotionally attached to it, and I'm not bringing up any sort of resistance, because I'm saying I would like to have a yellow amount of money. Like, it's just not something that is real. And so it's a really great way for us to protect ourselves. And so it seems that as we're doing a process like this and we're trying to reset what that thermostat is, doing it incrementally and doing it in a realistic way is going to bear a lot more fruit than just throwing out the biggest number possible, thinking it's going to bring up the biggest number of limiting beliefs. Right.
It's like saying with the fear of snakes. It's like, imagine seeing a snake on a scale of 0 to 10. How much fear do you have? Now, if I say, okay, imagine there's a doodle hopper in front of you.
Right.
And it's like, I have no fear of that, because it's not it's
nothing.
It's nothing. That at a certain amount of money, we throw out these huge numbers, and for the majority of folks, it's an intangible, and it has no it's not threatening, because it doesn't feel like anything real.
So then, what becomes a reasonable practical first step, or a reasonable practical approach? Because I think that there are times where we can get excited about something like this and create unrealistic expectations about our rate of progress, or even unrealistic expectations about the amount of time that we're going to spend on this. And it's easy for me to say, I'm going to spend 45 minutes every single morning tapping on my money limiting beliefs. And that's all fine and good. And there's just not, 4.5 hours of extra time I have a week to go do that.
Right.
That's not something that's reasonable that's going to happen. So how would you encourage someone to start?
So I always encourage folks to do some daily tapping, and having some kind of, even if it's just a couple of minutes a day on tapping on money issues, or whatever it is that their main focus is. So, first it's a matter of looking at, okay, what is it that you want? And what do you, because for some folks, they may say, well, I actually don't have a desire for any more money. And it's more a matter of just, okay, clearing stress, so that on a day-to-day basis, whatever dealings you have with money are not uncomfortable. And it's not a matter of, I just hate dealing with this filthy stuff. But getting an idea of, okay, here's my next financial goal. I want to be making this much more, and having a a more tangible idea of what that money is for, as opposed to, well, I just want to have more dollars in the bank. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. It's like the $500 million. It's like you don't even know what you would do with $500 million.
Right. Yeah.
So having that clarity of, okay, what is that I want? And as you can imagine, seeing, okay, so when you have that money, what are you going to do with it? And then visualizing that and seeing, okay, what is it that looks like? Is it, a somewhat nicer house or somewhat nicer car, or being able to write bigger checks to charity, or whatever it is, and seeing that, and then seeing where there might be some tension or where there might be some resistance, and tapping to clear that, so that it's like, it's comfortable for me seeing that. It's comfortable. I'm not worried about what other people are going to say. I'm not worried about my family disowning me because now I've got all these ideas about how fantastic I am with all this money, and all those different places where the tension stops me, trying to keep me safe. It's all brilliance. All of the ways that we block ourselves are brilliant, and the ways we limit our money. And that's one of the key things is having. And that might even be one of the places to start, is having compassion for yourself. Even though I resist more money, I choose to love and accept myself. Recognizing that every block I've put on my money, every time I have kept myself at whatever level I'm at, I have done so unconsciously with the absolute best of intentions to keep myself safe. And so recognize it, so that it's a matter of having compassion with myself for that, acknowledging myself, and then allowing myself to see, I probably could handle more money. I could handle the opportunities that come with it. So that's one of the things, as I said, for me, the money is the opportunity to do even more. And for a lot of folks, that would be what's scary about it. It's like, I couldn't handle any more opportunities. I can barely handle my life as it is. Don't bring me anything new. And money then becomes an excellent way of protecting ourselves from more opportunities.
There are two things inside of that I find really super interesting. The first is that last part there around the sense of being easy and gentle with ourselves. The limiting beliefs that come up around money. It's not safe for me to make more than my father. Mm-hmm. Intellectually, it's really easy to see how that's a foolish thing. Mm-hmm. It's really easy intellectually to see, if I have money, I'm not going to turn into some maniacal, horrible person. And I think because intellectually we're able to see through those beliefs so clearly, it's really easy for us not to be charitable with ourselves for struggling with this.
Exactly.
Because intellectually we say, well, this is so easy, duh, I should be able to handle this sort of thing.
Which is also brilliant, because if we can rationalize it away, we get to stay in our comfort zone.
Absolutely. And then the second piece, which I think was interesting in there, is that oftentimes when we think about issues with money, we think it's issues with money. But it could be that we have an issue with the consequence of the money. Right. So it's not that money is bad and money is evil, but if I have money, then my life is going to change, and that then becomes the thing that is dangerous. So it's not about the amount of money that I make, and it's not about the money that I have, but if I have those things, then I'm going to be a different person in a different way, and that's the thing that we see as dangerous. And it would be really easy for us to focus on X number of dollars and having money and having it come in and keeping it, when the issue might be around the consequence of how we use it.
Yeah, because we avoid change. And so more money is pretty much a guarantee of change. We're not, no matter how you slice it, there's going to be something that's going to be different. And, you can insist, well, I can make more money, but I'm going to still live in the same house, and I'm going to keep my job and this and that. But there are still going to be things that have to be dealt with. You're going to have, there's going to be differences in your taxes. There's going to be all kinds of changes. And so there's a part of us that says, you know what, even if my life is crap, it's my crap, and I know where it goes. I know how to handle it. Don't give me anything different. And it's, again, it's all has the best of intentions. And so we avoid those things. And also having a lack of money can be an excuse. If I am afraid of travel, say I'm afraid of flying or something like that, how convenient to not be able to afford to travel. It's like, oh, right. I'd love to go there, but how often do we use a lack of money as a justifiable reason for avoiding something that we might be afraid of doing? If our friends are going out and it's like, I don't really want to go out. You know what? I can't afford to go out to dinner tonight. And it becomes a really convenient excuse, even though you'll hear all these wealth gurus who go, there is no excuse for poverty in America, for not having enough money. There's too many opportunities, which just, is being avoiding the question of, well, why are people resisting money? Yes, the opportunities are there, but people have baggage around money. And, but it is a way that we may not have the beliefs of money is evil. It's just that money having money, I would lose my excuses for not doing certain things that I'm not comfortable doing.
So I guess the thing to loop back around to as we think of all of this is, over the course of the last half hour or so, we've talked about all of these different emotions, limiting beliefs, consequences, struggles. The thing I think that is most important that you've said is to start with where we are and to persistently do a little work now and just keep after that, slowly chipping away at it. Because on one way, this conversation can be exciting because it's like, oh, I know all of these things I can tap on. At the other, it could just be one more enormous task of, oh my gosh, look at all these limiting beliefs that Brad told me I need to go tap on. And that could be too much.
Yes. Which would be brilliant.
That's right. And if you're going to do that, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. I encourage you to do that. But it's also important for us to recognize that it can be process. And it's okay for us to give ourselves the space to take it a little bit at a time and be where we are. And those small incremental changes are going to add up into something really big.
Yeah, it's like losing weight. You know what? If you start out just going out and walking around the block, that's a start. And it's not going to be something that you change immediately overnight. It can be, but for the most part, it's going to be a gradual thing. But allowing yourself to go, what is one thing that I can do today to change my relationship with money, to be more comfortable with it? Maybe it's, go to your wallet and pull out some money and just ask yourself, how comfortable am I just holding this, just looking at it? And if it's not a 10, then you could just tap right there. Even though I'm uncomfortable, whatever might be coming up. Yeah, just a little bit, walk around the block each day and start with something simple and don't give yourself permission to not get caught up in the, it's too big an issue, I'm just not going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Excellent, Brad. As always, thanks for your time, man.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Brad. Brad, as you can see why, has been one of the most frequent guests on the Tapping Q&A podcast. I always love having conversations with him. If you'd like more information about Brad, all you need to do is go to tappingqandapodcast.com, click on the link for episode 285. Brad's contact information also is in the show notes. You can click to it from there. Also at tappingqandapodcast.com, you can hear all of the past interviews that I have done with Brad on a lot of really great topics. Please come join Brad, myself, Melissa, who was our guest last week on the podcast, as well as many other great speakers in Orlando in November for the Uncomplicate Your Relationship with Money conference. It will be 2 days of instruction and tapping. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, if you're in the mental health fields, you can get CEUs for attending the event as well. All you need to do is go to tappingqanda.com/money, go into the show notes, click on the link. If you haven't done so, like I said at the beginning, check out the archives, tappingqandapodcast.com. There are hundreds of audios that are just waiting for you to try out. If you know someone who could use the information that we shared today, please, please, please be our ambassador. Don't spam every inbox of every person you know in the world, but take a moment and pass this along to someone who you think might find this useful. it would really mean the world to me, because you're going to reach people who I am never going to make it to. If you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a guest or a topic that you'd like to see sometime in the future, I'm actually in the moment right now of rustling up a bunch of new guests to do recordings for the rest of the fall and the winter. We've done a lot of tap-alongs over the last few months. We're going to move back into interviews. Let me know who you'd like to hear or what you'd like to hear us talk about. Gene, Gene, at tappingqa.com. Inside the Tapping Q&A app, click on Contact. On the website, click the Contact button. I love hearing from people just like you. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.